I think we are. Let's see. I think we're live, but let
Yeah.
me double check. It says I'm setting up your meeting, but I think this is what happened last time. So I think we're live now. But, yep. Okay, let me turn this off so it doesn't confuse me. All right, Matt, welcome. You've been here before. We've done a couple of these with me, but he's got a new direction now. Temporary book club. Thanks for being my second live edition.
Thank you for getting me to read a book. I think this is the first book I've read since our podcast.
Well, good.
Maybe
I'm glad you're back
sad
on
to say.
it. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Matt Meldon, your cousin, musician, and temporary book club member, old school.
That's right. Emerson wants to say hi.
Hey, Emerson. He's camera shy, is like me.
Yeah, me too. All right. What's new? Actually, what is new with you and why your band? Anything going on?
Oh, Y's kind of on hiatus at the moment. Hey there. Yeah, I don't know. We're all just, hunkered down, obviously. I mean, I don't really know what the future brings with Y, but one thing I do know is that we'll probably have had the most profitable tour of 2020 compared to most bands. So
right. Nice.
We're lucky that we got all of our touring out of the way before all of this madness. So,
but no new news right now. Nothing you're working on or anything.
No, I mean I'm working on stuff just on my own, like everyone else out there. But it's weird for sure. I haven't played a gig in I don't even know how long, which is the first time in a long time. So,
why don't you plug your Sun Night thing?
Oh, the Sun Night, yeah. Well, Josiah has been doing those, so if people want to check that out, Josiah has been doing a Facebook or Instagram live thing for our little weekly gig that we have at the Comet normally. But yeah, you can find that. It's called Sun Night at the Comet. That's our Instagram name. So, and I honestly, I don't know what he's been doing, so I can't really talk about.
I went on, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and I think it was him and Doug talking, and I thought they were setting something up, and then I thought you were on it last Sunday, but I was doing stuff working on my.
Yeah, I haven't been on it. I've been on hiatus with Sun Night as well. So,
gotcha.
It's just been me and Brittany here hanging and
safe.
Making food and trying to stay sane, basically.
Exactly. All right, let's get into the book. The book Matt and I read is this Sapiens by Harari. When I asked Matt which book he wanted to do, I'd recommended this book a little while ago. This is the book he said. I read this back, it looks like 2018. So I had to go over it again this week because this is a dense book.
Like I was saying before we came live here, is I don't know that I'm smart enough to really talk about this book, but it's definitely entertaining and got a lot of it's chock full of information. But it's a lot of stuff that I feel like a lot of people know. Everyone knows this stuff. It's just a lot of truth in the book, and
very surface level. We all know, and this digs in. Like,
I guess that's what you're going to get when you cram basically all of entire history of humanity into 500 pages or whatever.
Right. I think I told somebody this is the most important book I ever read, but I don't think it's the most important book I read. I think most important books I've read, you'd have to say like my mid-20s or something that changed my trajectory. You know what I mean? Changed my way of thinking. This didn't really do that for me. What I think it did was it solidified a lot of my thoughts.
Yeah.
And I think it just made, I'd say it's not the most important book I ever read, but the most informational, widescape book, that gave me just feel like, wow, I know
well laid out, like just as far as the organization of it, and very logical progression of how it's laid out. Yeah.
Let's start with Sapiens. What I guess my first misunderstanding, and he mentioned this in the book, is I always thought that there was this direct, we look at these posters of evolution of man, and we always thought Neanderthal, and then blah blah blah, and then we get to Homo sapiens, and I just thought it was this step-by-step process, and all these other humans were before us,
Right.
not other species,
And concurrent and not concurrent, at least that was an interesting thing. I don't think I even knew that really. I'd maybe heard it, but I had not read much about like how Neanderthals and Homo sapiens were around for a long time together.
Right, that they were separate branches off the same tree.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think they put it like the genus, right? The family was apes. Am I correct on that? I didn't write this down.
Oh, you're talking like 15 chapters ago, Mike.
Right.
I like crammed in like 500 pages in the last 2 days here.
Right. So essentially what they're saying is that Homo sapiens had brothers on the same level, brothers and sisters on the same level, and they were, I think, known so far. There are about 6 of them. Homo erectus being one.
Right.
There was another one that was almost like
oh yeah, the ones on the islands. Yeah,
Faroe Islands, I believe, or some Faroe Islands, right? That were dwarf species.
Mm-hmm.
Just a different species than us, and then we came along, and we were different. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but we weren't different at first, correct?
Right. Yeah.
What happened?
Well, it sounds like what I think the first Homo sapiens emerged in northeastern Africa, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And then they, kind of gravitate north and east into Asia and up into Europe, and then
got pushed back. They got pushed back the first time. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that.
See, and I've read this book now since I've read it twice practically.
Oh, good.
I didn't realize it the first time either. But you catch things the second time. I did not realize it. They try this first, and they get pushed back because the Neanderthals, all these other species were already living there.
And they're more powerful physically.
They were, yes, they were more powerful physically, and the Homo sapiens had nothing on them until about 75,000 years ago.
This was one of the most interesting points in this book to me, was what kind of really separates Homo sapiens apart from basically every other life form on the planet.
Right, the cognitive revolution, which I had never heard of before this book. Have you?
No, I mean, well, I'd never heard of it as in that term. I've kind of thought about it, of course. I think that's like a thing that a lot of people have thought about. Is that noise? Can you hear that noise in the background? Is that loud?
No, you're fine. You're fine. Good. I got a dog and a boy wrestling here. Can you hear that?
Yeah, it's basically, I guess the concept there is that humans basically learn how to band together in groups bigger than what was originally just tribes, and so basically what the foundation that allows us to become bigger groups is religion. At some point,
right. What the cognitive revolution did, and they still don't know what happened in our chemistry, our brain. There's this one side theory that's not in this book that somebody said, Homo sapiens started eating psilocybin and mushrooms, and that changed the brain chemistry. And it's still a valid, I think, possibly theory. Maybe that's not valid, but as far as this book doesn't mention,
I've heard that That's that one author. What's his name?
Kenny or McKinnon, something.
You're close.
Yeah, something
McKenna,
like that.
right?
Terrence
McKenna.
McKenna, right. But anyway, something happened, and what it allowed Homo sapiens to do that no other group could do is, number one, their communication allowed them to gossip, which allowed them to talk about one another, and to say, hey, is that guy, can I trust that guy? No, you can't trust him because he did this, which other animals can't do. And we couldn't do for the first, couple hundred, not hundred, a couple, 25,000 years, I guess, as being Homo sapiens. But something snapped with the cognitive revolution. But upon that, the bigger thing than even being able to gossip, which is funny, I think gossip is having that big of a role is very interesting. It's something that I hate. You think is just bad for human nature, but it actually allows us to be human. Yeah, exactly. But the bigger thing is that we were able to believe in fiction, that we were able to believe in something that doesn't exist, where other animals communicate and say, hey, don't go there, there's a lion that's good for you. But and they said that monkeys could lie, monkeys could say, don't go there, there's a lion. But to make up a fiction to say, hey, if we go there, this could happen, or the looking towards the future even takes imagination to say, if we plan this out, this is good. Or as if you said before, or there is a religion, there is a God here that we're all working for a common cause and allows us all to work together. So two things that allowed us to separate from nature, which really just blows my mind, is gossip and fiction, lies. Gossip and lies. That's nuts.
Yeah.
That blows my mind. But it did. It allowed us to go to that
and
new reality.
It made me really wonder if I would have been a Neanderthal, or
right,
who I would have preferred hanging out with.
I'm not going that direction. Exactly right. I know, you're right. The other interesting thing that I just did not want to skip over was, we all believe that we've come through this thread, but that we were Neanderthals at one time, and the book says no. That they did not. It would be like, two separate species cannot have fertile children, like a horse and a donkey. The mules that they have are sterile, and that's how it would have been for Homo sapiens and any other human species. They could not procreate, except for maybe the really early time period where we still were coming off the same branch.
Yeah. Well, they said that we all have, or that typically, I think he said that there was some people do have more Neanderthal DNA than most, but it's still like between 1% and 3% or something.
And to make up for that, to not be able to say that they were procreating later, they said that DNA from Neanderthal had to come from very early, when Homo sapiens were still splitting off that branch. So it's not like they ran into them and said, hey, let's get together and work together. They probably would have been, well, what we know is they probably, most likely, once they had the cognitive revolution and made plans and worked together, as Homo sapiens do, that's what made them powerful. When they went back up into Europe, they were able to join together with bigger forces and destroy, probably massacre, all the Neanderthals. Was that your thought, or what were you thinking?
Yeah, definitely. That's my guess. That it wasn't that great of a end for our old friends.
I think they gave an alternate history where they said, hey, competing for the same natural resources, Neanderthals might have died off. But my guess is that it was probably more violent than that.
I'm sure it was, not pretty.
All right, so that was the main first thing in the book was the cognitive revolution. That really, and I think I had a note here that I just want to say. Cognitive revolution mainly made our brains different than animals because it allowed us to gossip, believe in fiction, do abstract thinking, plan for the future, and have innovation, which are the things you don't find in the animal kingdom, and it allowed us to move forward. Then they lived that way for a while, for about, I think, more than 50,000 years. I think 75,000 BC to about 10,000 BC, so 60,000 some years.
Yeah.
We lived that way as foragers, hunter-gatherers. And then we switched. And we have this agricultural revolution around 12,000 BC. Yeah, my question is, and that's a big topic, but my question, and I don't know if the book answers it, I think I have my own answer, but why? Why do you think they mentioned, we always heard that it started in the Fertile Crescent, it started one place and might have spread out, but the book says no, it happened separately all around the world at about the same time.
Yeah.
My question is, why do you think? Why did we go from having this way of life to becoming farmers?
Yeah, that is one of the underlying interesting things in the book, and that happens in a couple times, it sounds like, throughout history, where different areas of the world with humans kind of starting to do the same things at the same time, even though they had no knowledge of it, obviously happening anywhere else. But yeah, that was one of my favorite parts of the book, was talking about like how that came about. And, what they say is that, it didn't all just happen like overnight, where people start, they go from like a forager lifestyle to, all of a sudden they're, just staying put in one place. It more than likely is that they are, still foraging, but then they're like, are going back to some crops that they left planted, and that would just be another food source. So, and then gradually, it becomes
over time
where they like eventually are doing it to the extent where they're just staying in one place and hunkering down all year round. So
I just found it interesting that, like you said, how does it all happen at the same time? We get the cognitive revolution, 75,000 BC, agricultural revolution, 12,000. We see it spring up at different places. And the book gives the one explanation. It still doesn't answer the question why, but it says that this could have come about, like you said, stumbled upon it, and eventually they just saw that this could be a different way of life. But the other book gave an explanation of, once they were able to create myths that they all could believe in that would allow them to work together, the more powerful or the leaders would allow them to say, hey, let's create this, like a pyramid, right? An example, something for their gods that would take thousands of workers.
Yeah.
So those thousands of workers had to stay in one point, take a long time to build this. And because they're staying there, they're having to feed them there. And they said that might have been a reason for some of the first civilizations to come about, but still doesn't answer the question of why. Maybe they all did that. Maybe it was religion everywhere. Maybe that was just the time frame it took. But that still blows my mind that that agricultural revolution happened in, North America, South America, Central America, Asia. But I think that the pushing thing from here is, and the question is, why would they want to switch if it was going so well? They've done this for 2 million years. Why switch if it's just happened this way, or do you change your whole way of life? That's why do you do that?
Good question. And a lot of the, that was one of the other big questions in the book, is like, well, who was happier and what lifestyle was happier for people? And, I've always been kind of a hermit. So I've always had a bit of over glorification of like a hermetic / foraging type of lifestyle, less people
live in the woods.
But I did find that interesting. One of my favorite quotes in the book was talking about the beginning of the agricultural revolution, and said, this is the essence of the agricultural revolution, to keep more people alive under worse conditions. And he calls that the luxury trap.
Yes, and that's what exactly perfect, because this was some people's idea. Well, I believe that as you create a myth now that everybody can believe in, there's going to be people at the top of that myth, hierarchies, And the people at the top realized, if I can get them to believe in something, right, I can have them work with me doing very little work and them doing a lot of work.
Yeah.
Right? It's crazy to say that, our first thoughts, or not first, I mean, it took a little while, but once we get going in the cognitive revolution as humans, it really is to say, I can use other people for my own luxury, which is essentially what it is. There was another quote. Well, it's still the same. For the agricultural revolution, this is where sapiens cast off the intimate symbiosis with nature and spirited them towards greed and alienation. Right. So this idea that I think people started to think of the future, how can we use people? How can we be innovative? And started to say, there's a lot of us now working together. We don't all have to work so hard, and greed comes into play.
And also, it's just like, you think about it, it's a whole different way of life comes about. Like, if you're foraging, what do you have as far as belongings? Not a lot. It's like anything you're carrying on your back, basically, versus, the beginning of, staying in one place. Obviously, you get a house, and then you start to fill that house with belongings.
That you think are going to make your life easier.
Right.
Right. And two things to that. One, you said that the hardest part to study the period before the agricultural revolution is because usually the only way we study people from that time is obviously there's no written history, is through belongings, through artifacts that have existed. Well, they didn't have any. And we call that time period the Stone Age, which is a misnomer because really everything was made of wood. Right. It should be called the Wood Age, which is all now destroyed. We can't study it. But now, like you said, we start to make artifacts for every cultural thing we do, religion, eating, everything we do. We make artifacts for. And we think this is going to make our life easier. But what they've shown is that the agricultural evolution has probably caused more pain and suffering on the average person and domesticated animal than anything else.
It sounds like it's really the beginning of the end, really, is that, from there it just kind of spirals very quickly, relatively speaking, to the planet really can't sustain this many humans. Whereas before we were basically just the top of the perfect food chain.
Right.
Now it's basically the very beginning of us.
But the interesting that we weren't even the top. Right. Which was interesting. I mean, I think they said that when we were early Homo sapiens, right, our special tool was marrow suckers.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
Scavengers, basically.
Scavengers, right?
Like going after all the big animals that eaten their fill, then we'd crack the bones open, and
we'd be the scavengers. We'd be the guys going in, and there's no meat left, but we became efficient of sucking the marrow. So we knew our place. We weren't high up there yet, and it wasn't until cognitive revolution when we were able to work together. And for people that are watching and haven't read this, one, read it, because we are barely touching what's going on. But when you look at animals and you're saying work together, the chimpanzees and these animals can work together really well, I think, in groups of up to about 20 to 50. And we could too. We could have small bands. And then they said once early age starting of a cognitive revolution, we could work better together when we learned how to gossip. When you were able to not talk about just what's in front of your face, but you were able to say, hey, don't trust that Matt guy. He's going to screw you over one way or another.
Yeah.
You were able to get to, and this is still with today, they say, if you go through only gossip and you just like at a work setting, up to 150 people. And they said to get
that was interesting. And I was like, I looked over at my Facebook feed. I was like, I've got a lot more than 150, but really, I could probably narrow that down.
But would you trust all them? Right, exactly. And then And then once we got to this point where we could believe in a myth, these, and we're going to get to that right now, which are these imagined orders. If you all believe in the same idea, whether it's a god, whether it's a country, whether it's a belief in democracy, if you all believe in that same idea,
Yeah.
now you
Which
can work
is
together
all
in the thousands.
Yeah,
Right.
which I found that was another interesting point, was that he made a big deal about that truly is like a fiction. The idea of a country is a totally man-made idea that really.
Well, and human rights.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, that was another.
Right. Yeah. So I think the interesting thing, I think that why I became such a big reader. Have you ever heard of Plato's allegory of the cave? You ever heard that? Okay. So Plato has this thing, and I'll let you all look it up because it's a phenomenal parable or allegory, where he talks about that, most people, if you look at humankind, we are these people that are sitting in the cave. It's as if we were handcuffed there, and we're seeing a cave wall. He said, imagine that your whole life is just looking at a cave wall, handcuffed there, and all you can see are reflections of shadows from the opening of the cave and shadows from the fire, and that is your whole reality, right? And he says that's what humankind is. But when you learn, and pretty much what he was talking about, Plato, when you learn about these myths and the truths of these myths and these imagined realities, when you learn that they're false, right? When you see the truth, you are exiting the cave. Well, the problem with that is, if you're the only guy out there, you're going to be very lonesome. But he's saying that is enlightenment, and I think, yeah. So one of the oldest. This is a book I used in the last podcast, Lucretius. But this illustration has nothing to do with Lucretius.
I did read that back in the day in my old
Yeah, and this illustration is the same thing of somebody leaving the cave. This is not a cave, but seeing what reality is. Well, anyways, that allegory has always spoken to me, and I always thought, wow, I'm able to see through a lot of these lies that aren't real, and I'm getting there. I thought I was getting somewhere, but I'm not.
Right.
You mentioned the other quote. Do you have that other quote written down that you said?
I did. Which one? The luxury trap.
The second one. There's no way. Do you have that one?
Oh. Yeah. There's no way out of the imagined order. When we break down our prison walls and run towards freedom, we are in fact running towards the more spacious exercise yard of a bigger prison. Which, right. Yeah, that was an interesting quote, as when he's talking about basically, it's basically, if again, returning to the idea of a hermit, someone that's, basically like, well, this sucks, being in this disease-ridden city, I'm going to go out and live in the mountains by myself. But right. Yeah, obviously that presents a whole slew of.
I was going to say, you still are underneath. If everybody else believes in it, you're still underneath it.
Yeah.
You're still beholden to it. But my thing too is just feeling like, man, I figured out religion. I know what it is. I know the truth behind it. And then it's like, as I get older, wow, I figured out what the government is. What the role is, and feeling. But then I find myself, I'm reading this book and I'm thinking, I'm out of the cave essentially. I figured out a lot of stuff, and then it's like he hits you with like, well, whatever you believe in, I don't care what you are, it's an imagined reality, because that's what we are at the cognitive revolution level. You're looking at the future. That's fake. I'm looking at, you believe in human rights. You believe in democracy. You believe in the judicial. You believe in justice.
Mm-hmm.
That's fake.
Yeah.
All this is fake. And then it just blows your mind.
It's an idea. Okay. It's an idea versus, out in nature, if there's none of that.
Right. And it is that you just think,
ask the Neanderthals about justice.
Exactly. Right. It's something that we've created. Now, not saying it wasn't for the better, that's a thing I think that Harari talks about is, yeah, some of these are better ideas than others, but you still need to know that they are imagined, that these
Mhm.
things are all imagined orders, and they're meant to believe it. Oh, the other point that I wanted to make with that is, man, I was just so cynical of religious leaders, government leaders, that just, I looked at them as just like so evil because they knew the truth like we do of what they're speaking through their teeth, that it's all fake. And yet they, use the people's ignorance to speak against it. But Harari says in his book, most powerful people in those institutions aren't there because they don't believe it.
Right.
They're there because they believe it.
Right.
And that made me change a little bit too, because yeah, to be honest, I don't ever want to run for president. Why? Because most of those things I don't believe in fully, the things that they might be working for, or just that goal. But
Right.
if you're working to be that leadership, you believe in those things. And that blew my mind too. I just thought that they were manipulating people over, and some of them are.
Well, they are, absolutely, but that's the job.
It's true. True.
That's, at the end of the day, it's like, they might move it one step maybe forward, and then, obviously there can be two steps back, as we're experiencing. But
Yep.
yeah, that's the gig.
That is the gig. It's crazy. It's scary. Okay, so I think I know your answer to this, but was the agricultural revolution, he says this is the conundrum, was it the road for prosperity for Homo sapiens, or was it the road to perdition? What's your answer?
Well, I mean, I think that if you were to ask any person that was foraging, they would probably obviously see, if you gave them the choice of the two lifestyles, I think, 99% of them are obviously going to choose the agricultural life when they see what that brings. Um, fast forward another 10,000 years, that brings up a bigger question, I guess.
Yeah, I think so too. I think one of the interesting things, it says our mind and the DNA in our mind is totally made for the foraging lifestyle,
Yeah.
and not
I think
made
that
for this
especially
lifestyle.
nowadays, it's like, I think a lot of people, are feeling that more and more, as like, life becomes more and more like internal, and
Right.
like
Overwhelmed, depressed,
in this.
stressed out. Yes, connected artificially. What are you working towards? Taking depressants, and you think, is this? And it seems like the new normal. And guess what? According to this book, it is the normal. You are not feeling well because our society is not well. It is not what. Well, maybe it's not that it's not well, but 2 million years of being a human on Earth and creating your DNA, and just in the last 10,000, which is nothing,
Yeah.
we switched. Yeah,
Well, that
our
was
brains are not ready.
that's an idea that he gets to at the very end of the book, which I was just reading not long ago, was dissatisfaction, no matter what. That's like the most inherent human trait there is, basically, is never being satisfied with what you have. If you have, a farm, then you want, 10 farms.
But it wasn't that way for 2 million years.
No.
Until the cognitive revolution.
Right.
Until we could think of the future and wonder what could be, what could we do better. I think that's just crazy interesting. And that's why, a lot of people that don't believe in evolution really can't put their mind in to say, how were we animals? They can't understand that. It's because we had such a that cognitive revolution did everything. So we don't have history then. There weren't revolutions before there. There wasn't art. There weren't anything, because everything was on a simple basis, animalistic basis.
Mm-hmm.
And then we became, I hate to say the word human, because I don't want to make us that different, but that cognitive revolution did everything. And then the agricultural revolution. So Matt, did you say it was your answer was pretty much it was good until now we're seeing the demise, right? We're seeing the negative aspects of the age.
Well, I think I don't know what we're seeing now, but definitely that's something he starts talking about at the end of the book, is that now it's becoming so much more technology based and less things in the physical realm, or even it doesn't even have to be physical. Just like knowledge is, people know less, but they obviously know more things, but they actually know less at the same time.
Right. Well, he talked about when we were foragers, we had to know every mushroom that was going to kill us.
Right.
Everything that was going to heal us, everything we could eat, couldn't eat. Right. And you had to memorize that, he mentioned in the book. So we actually used our minds analytically a lot more before.
And our bodies. Yeah.
And our bodies. Right.
Yeah. It's like a decline in both things. It's like you're less really in tune with the world around you and much less in tune with the physical world.
Yep. And I just want to mention this to people that have not read this again. He hits on every little thing that Matt's saying and I say, he'll go into detail about pretty well. I mean, just to talk about all of our wants and desires and why they are, what commercialism and all these kinds of things. And then Matt talked about the future too. And he has a second book out that I read called Homo Deus, which is like what he sees as the next step that Homo sapiens are going to go. He did mention one thing in this book that I wanted to say before we got past that, is, as I mentioned, our demise, right, with global warming. And global warming, I want to say this, climate change. Climate change is not going to kill the planet. The planet's going to be fine, probably another couple billion years. It's going to kill Homo sapiens, right? So, yes, we are probably not going to be here another 10,000 years. And I thought it was interesting because we look at ourselves as, like, as we said, we had 6 different other species alongside of us, and they all died out. But I think one of those other species lived almost 2 million years, right?
The Neanderthals were around way longer.
Right. And
Homo
erectus. Homo erectus, 2 million years.
Yeah.
And we're nowhere close to that. We're like 1/10 of that.
Right.
So when we look at ourselves, it's like, well, we're the most dominant and the smartest, and we came around. They lasted like you're supposed to do. The only goal of our DNA is to last. They lasted almost 2 million years.
Well, I think the goal of our DNA is to procreate, or to.
Well, that's DNA.
Yeah. It seems that that's our real genetic thing, is just to consume as much as possible.
Consume, right? It switched to consume, right? And pleasure, right? Which isn't a bad thing, and take advantage of others, which is a shame. Let me see. There were some other points I wanted to hit on. What do you think?
I was really interested in. He spent a lot of time talking about. So you get your agriculture comes around, and then the next thing, the big thing to come after that is the written word,
right?
Which I thought that was
cuneiform.
Really interesting. Yeah, and then it's like
changed everything.
Yeah,
changed everything. That, and having to, our minds were always used to remember things, and it was the first time too that we started to have to know numbers.
Numbers. Money.
Right.
Written word, like, so basically just like record keeping. And then it's like that was another one of the things that happens at the same time throughout the world. You got your agriculture, and then roughly at the same time systems of writing, record keeping, cataloging, and the ability to retrieve information.
There's and as you talk, man, I mean, the things that I remember come flooding back, because and I have to say, part of it's greed too. Well,
who owes you money?
Who owes you money? Right, exactly. And where can I be better off tomorrow? Where they said that, the hunter-gatherers and foragers couldn't save food. And you didn't worry about it either, though. You didn't worry about it. Once we became farmers, you had to worry, because you had to save food to survive over the winter, and because you weren't roaming to go get food elsewhere, and you had to worry about that year that was off, that was a flood or a drought that was going to happen. You had to worry about it. But the most interesting of all that was you were always having a surplus.
Yeah.
And who did that surplus go to?
Yeah.
The elite.
Yeah.
And that's what created the system. Once we created the agricultural revolution and there was an elite that could take a surplus, they thought, how can I be part of this guy that's not working down here, but I get the surplus? And that's,
this is an interesting quote that I had here. It was the most important impact of script on human history is that it has gradually changed the way humans think and view the world. Free association and holistic thought, i.e. foraging lifestyle, have given way to compartmentalization and bureaucracy. Wow. Which is basically like saying like you've got all of a sudden one person who their entire existence is their ability to write down words for the
details. Details. You're right. And I'll be honest, when you got to that, what I reread of the book was the first half, and then the 2 chapters that you were talking about. I didn't get to reread that part, so I barely remember it. But that blows my mind, because now there were people that were instructed just to remember the detail. That was their whole job. That's bureaucracy.
Yeah,
essentially. That's crazy. What was the scariest thing in the book? What was so I was going to say this. All right, let's start with scariest thing about the book. What scared you when you read this book? Or what is the most pessimistic thing?
Well, I mean, obviously the specifics of this current situation we're in is, definitely all of the things with agriculture and, farming, eating meat, obviously all these things. I mean, who knows what really started this all happening, but
this wouldn't have existed, obviously.
No.
No, it only allowed for because of there. And maybe, Mother Nature's got something to say.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, that's what it is. It's like, we're fighting directly. I mean, this is, if you need any more red flags that Mother Nature is like, enough is enough, it doesn't really get any more clear cut than what's
exactly. I think the scariest thing for the book is this guy is just so straightforward. Homo Deus is scarier.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But it just
shows like,
me.
That's the thing, is that I'm like already like envisioning, like by the time you and I are, old, we're already old, but like really old. I'm guessing within the next 20 years, I may be one of the few guys, hopefully, that doesn't have one of these like buried in my skull, or a
cyborg,
chip, or whatever it is. Like I'll just be some like naked guy running around the woods. That's my hope, at least. I don't know.
No, the fact that you have one of those now shows that you probably will go along with it.
I don't know though.
I hope not.
I've told myself already that once it goes biological, it's in my body. That's where I draw.
You're done. You got to read Homo Deus. It is really good.
I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah, I think the scariest thing for me, or the most pessimistic thing for me about this book, was just, and I've mentioned it numerous times, was just that the whole core of our being, once we hit the cognitive revolution, was a proportion of our population. Once we were able to think of the future and see what was available to us, was greed. That is in us, that is part of, since we started, as not since we started, but since we've clicked, that is what society is. Society is built on this greed and taking advantage of others. And I think that was really the most pessimistic thing that I've seen. And that nothing is really nothing's really switched us up. If anything, the Industrial Revolution and read the book. It's a great book. Matt, what is do you have something to add?
I had one other thing that it made me. I watched this documentary yesterday, and it tied really well into another quote that I read today, which was that one of the things that has made it possible for modern social orders to hold together is the spread of an almost religious belief in technology and in the methods of science research, which have been replaced to some extent, or they have replaced to some extent the belief in absolute truths. And that basically what he was talking about there is, this idea of like our modern economy, a lot of it is based more and more on belief that it's always going to get better and we're always going to come up with some idea that gets us out of whatever mess we're in.
Yep.
Or that's always, lifting us up.
That we're headed in the right direction no matter what. We might have hiccups,
which
but no matter what.
Yeah, which we obviously saw, back in the 90s or whatever, when Silicon Valley and the start of this, technology-based economy. But now already like 30 years later, all of a sudden it's like, this economy is like, what is it?
Right.
And it's like, how much innovation really is going on?
And what is the main driver for it?
Yeah, well, it's great.
Where they make, and they're getting all their money from our information.
Right. And well, the documentary that made me think about this was this one on HBO.
What's it called? Do you remember?
I can't remember, but it's about this lady, Elizabeth Holmes, who started this company, Theranos. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
And
great, where she was just a bullshitter.
Dude, yeah, and I couldn't believe it. It's like she's
give me money. I got an idea.
Henry Kissinger, Robert Schultz, like Clinton's, like
throwing
money.
Obama,
Biden, they're all behind her like she's the second coming of Steve Jobs. And her entire, I think she was worth $9 billion.
Yeah, because of what? Because she had an idea that was not scientifically based at all.
Yeah, no, and it was just mind-boggling, and it was a total scam. It was like literally like a black box filled with nothing.
But her idea, it was good, but she had no scientific reason to think that could work. But she made people just
all of her teachers
work.
Before she dropped out of Stanford, all of her teachers like, yeah, that's not going to work.
Yeah,
and she just
I'll make it work.
No, she made it work by going and getting money from
billions
people. Yeah,
billions,
and did work.
But you're right. We've come to that point where it's a blind faith almost in new technology, and it's scary. And that's why we trust everything that I trust Facebook. I trust everything I'm on, even though I know what they're doing privacy wise and my information. It's just blind faith that I hate to say that I'm a part of, but I'm following along too. It's scary.
Yeah.
What is the most optimistic message of this book, if any? What's a good thing you took from it about?
That the earth will continue on, with or without us. Probably without.
Yeah, I think I'm saying. I agree.
Yeah.
Is that we're doing horrible damage. Hopefully we make it. I don't know. Hopefully it's not a catastrophic ending. But I don't know. But knowing that in the end, no matter what damage we do, things are going to end up all right.
Well, that's I guess one silver lining to especially all the stuff that's happening currently is that you see all these pictures of cities with no smog for the first time in 30 years and things. Is like, wow, nature is pretty resilient if you just give it a chance.
It wants to kick back. Did you see the article I posted today about Holland? I think it's Holland. I might kick myself. I think it's the Netherlands. Might be Belgium. Sorry. But anyways, they are saying we're not going to come out of this pandemic the same. We're not doing status quo. We are going to change things up. They have something called the donut economics, where, where we all know that economics is always about the bottom line. And so this country, Netherlands, said, why are we running a country where our economics are all about the bottom line? We have to take into consideration two things: the health of our people and the environment. And so they say that is part of the bottom line economic model moving forward. How cool is that? That's crazy. That blows my mind.
Well, good luck getting that past the United States, but more power to them.
Right. Well, and I'll be not to be pessimistic, but at least I don't think I'll be as hard on people that are greedy anymore, because it's kind of in our DNA. I'll let it. Maybe I'll be a little bit more like, all right, I get where you're coming from.
I'm guessing that was the Dutch. I mean, that was actually one of the things I read today too, was talking about how, like, the Dutch East Indies Company and stuff. And I had always heard about that, and I was like, really? How were the Dutch so powerful back in the day?
Oh man,
it was like they talked about, it was really, they had really good credit. And that was like kind of like mind-boggling. It was like, wow.
Well, because they owned everything. The Dutch East India Company, corporations back then, I mean, they were the first nations, really. Before nations were nations, they were kingdoms. Corporations were nations, where the Dutch East India Company owned India for 200 years before the English owned it.
Right.
And that was just a hiccup, that the English came in with their power and were able to like kind of take control. But that East, and well, even the United States was owned by corporations first. Virginia Company,
and the Dutch, they were.
And the Dutch, and the Dutch in New York, exactly. So crazy. All right, I said 45 minutes, so we got to wrap it up. I just want to say, next episode, I'm with my buddy Jake Richards, and it'll be a little bit lighter. We're reading a novel.
I need to read a fiction after this.
Yeah, well, Matt's going to be back with me after we read a fiction, but this is the one next week. Tim Winton's The Riders. Matt will be back with me, maybe with some Murakami or something. That'd be
maybe cool. We'll be on the kayaks, hopefully.
That'd be awesome. We could do it then. Yeah, well, even social distancing we can do. It. So I just want to thank Matt. I also wanted to throw out one thing that Beth Brackman, thank you for my logo again. I appreciate it. June 5th, an amazing band called the Harm Brothers release a new album called Skyline Over. Check that out. Check out any of their other music online. Check out Why. Check out Matt. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. I miss you. Hopefully we'll see each other soon.
Yeah.
All right, dude. Take care.
Bye-bye.
See ya.